People always be asking, Loki the Gamer, why'd you wait so long to make your Magic the Gathering cards based off Civ 6, when Civ 7 is already out? Well, a couple of reasons. First, I had to wait until Civ 6 was done. Now, there are no new releases, as far as we know, that will ever be made to Civ 6. So I could include all the leaders and all the civs, and knowing that the set was complete. And also, the better reason is that the more I wait, the more magic cards there exist, and the more awesome new keywords and concepts that I can draw upon, such as mounts. As of this recording, Thunder Junction has existed for a few months now, and we have the concept of mounts. And there are no civs more grateful to have mounts in Magic than the Mongolian people. This is the Mongolian episode of my Civ 6 themed Magic cards. Yay! And so the Mongolian pack will have 1 legendary land, 2 leaders, 2 unique builds, and 1 card based on a leader's agenda. So, your traditional 2-leader pack. An overview of Mongolia, well, as we've said, horses, horses, and more horses, and specifically mounts. So, indeed, this pack gives us the ultimate reason why this whole time, if you're a regular listener of this series, you know that anytime that a creature depicts a horseman, so a dude on a horse, typical Magic cards always give the creature type to the dude. So they'll say human knight, or Kitkin scout, or elf person, whatever. No mention to the fact that there's a horse involved in this creature as well. But in Magic terms, we've always had to do that. It was very important to tell apart a regular melee dude from a person on a horse kind of creature. So therefore, we've always had human horse knight, or human horse ranger, things like that. So it feels weird when you think human horse, you think, oh, okay, it's gonna be some kind of weird hybrid mutant, a centaur of some kind. No, it just means that there's a human on the card, and there's a horse on the card. After all, Magic has done things like that slightly in the past, such as these cards with 2 legendary creatures in one, these combo, these collaboration cards, such as, Yargle and Multani, is that one of them? So, I think there's, one of them is a frog, I think, and the other one is a spirit, and sure enough, the card says Frog Spirit. 1 creature type to represent either member of that partnership. So there you go, why not have human horse? Well, maybe Magic doesn't think like that, but I've had to do that in all of my homemade Civ 6 themed cards, because we need more horses, we need more mounts, otherwise Mongolia just doesn't serve a purpose. So yes, that's why Mongolia is very glad that I've done all of these horses, all of these human horses and things like that across all of this huge project. There will be the concept of trade posts and diplomatic visibility, which in turn will turn into combat bonuses for Mongolia. So yes, the concept of trading outposts is not something that is readily understood by Civ 6 players. It's an almost invisible concept. There are little icons that show up in your cities and other people's cities to remind you that yes, you've built a trading outpost, but the act of building a trading outpost is something that you set up when you first send a trade route to such a city, but the trading outpost is actually constructed only much later when the trade route is actually done. Yeah, and then there aren't a whole bunch of bells and whistles to remind you that that trading outpost is a thing. So yes, it works a little bit behind the scenes, but it's important to get a good grasp of that concept when you play Mongolia, because it's one of their main powers. They get extra diplomatic visibility, which turns into combat bonuses. Expect some trading to happen, so basically you do something for the opponent and you get something in return. Normally we're talking about gold, ramping, treasures, because trading is about trading gold, but the Mongolian trading must lead to combat bonuses, so instead expect something combat related to be involved with this trading concept. And since we're talking about diplomatic visibility, I turned that into, peeking, looking at cards that you normally shouldn't be allowed to. That's what our chart tells us. Diplomatic visibility, those rare times that a civilization actually cares about that, turns into peeking. And finally, trading posts will also translate into exploration. You need to explore, you need to go far, you need to reach far to establish trading outposts. So I've turned that into landfall. So you can't really trade far without having explored far and therefore having had a lot of landfall. So trading involves all of these things. The concept of you take something, I take something, turns into military bonuses. Sometimes it's also landfall, and you get to do some peaking. That's really what the Mongolian people will be about, with a strong emphasis on +1/+1 counters. And that brings us to the color identity of Mongolia. I had to pick black. And there's a part of me that really wanted to give them only black, because it's a huge, uncaring army that just destroys everything in its path, that has established the largest empire the world has ever seen, as far as we know. Genghis Khan himself, perhaps the most objectively evil leader in all of Civilization 6, or perhaps all Civ games. No, wait, that's not true. Stalin was in Civ 1 after all. But in the end, I couldn't just make it a black Civ. First of all, Kublai Khan is also a leader, so he needs something a little bit more, growth-related and peace-related than black. And also, I wanted something to represent the vast swaths of land of Mongolia, so that called for green. Large land equals green, yeah, it's a little bit of a stretch. It's not a very strong thematic reason to include green just because they have a large land. However, one of the main reasons that I did include green in their color identity was for magic reasons, for synergetic, Magic the Gathering reasons. Like I said, I wanted Mongolia to rely heavily on +1/+1 counters, and if I gave them only black, then that whole aspect of Mongolia would be very limited. Black is not the best color to add +1/+1 counters on your creatures, to have triggers that trigger when you add counters, things like that. So it doesn't really synergize very well with the concept of +1/+1 counters. So I had to give it either green or white, the two best colors to handle +1/+1 counters. I couldn't give Mongolia white. It just didn't sit well with me. That's way too nice and peaceful and happy and organized. I had to give them green. That felt like a good compromise. So there we go. Let's take a look at the Mongolian ability in Civilization 6. It is something that we really shouldn't try to pronounce. It says or2, like or2D2 or something like that, but seems simple enough. But why all these umlauts? I mean, 3 umlauts? I don't know. If any Mongolian people can tell us how to pronounce that, I'd be very curious. But this is the ability that deals with all of these trading posts. So basically, Mongolia does not have to wait until a trade route is over. They get their trading outposts right away. And everything we talked about, these trading outposts turn into diplomatic visibility, and then when you have more diplomatic visibility over a civ than they have on you, you get combat bonuses. So let's take a look at what I did for the land of Mongolia. I actually turned it into another one of those two-sided modal lands because it felt like there was a whole lot in there to pick apart. So here we have Mongolia and Mongolia Trading Empire. Both are deserts, so if any civ out there do care about deserts a lot, and I can certainly think of the Mali, so Mansa Musa and company are very happy about having yet another desert. And look at that, it gives you a colorless. Either side gives you a colorless, so the color identity of this card is colorless, so it would fit in a Mali deck for sure, and it fits in a deck of either Genghis Khan or Kublai Khan. Since they don't have exactly the same identity, well, they can both use the legendary mythic land of Mongolia / Mongolia Trading Empire. So there's that Ur2 ability on the front side. Tap, add a +1/+1 counter on each of one target creature an opponent controls and up to one target creature you control. So there you go, there's the concept of trade, a little bit for you, a little bit for me. So we put a counter on a creature you control and an opponent controls. Seems mighty game-changing to just, for free, just tap a land and add counters to a creature. but it's well balanced by the fact that you have to strengthen your opponent's creature as well. So that's why it's an ability that normally wouldn't go on a land, or it wouldn't go on a land for that cheap, but yeah, it's balanced because it's a trade. Yes, and then you get to tap it for a colorless, and you may also bounce it to your hand. And you'll see, this is I think the only time that I made a modal card where both sides can bounce back to your hand. So you can at will keep bouncing Mongolia to your hand to flip it back to the other side truly as many times as you want in the game. Of course, it uses a land drop each time, so it kind of slows you down. So better use that on a turn where you don't have a land to drop, otherwise you'll be missing an opportunity to ramp. But the option is there, because the other side of the card actually cares about your opponents having +1/+1 counters. So, since the Civilization 6 ability kind of requires you to have had trade dealings with an opponent in order to get that extra diplomatic visibility over them, well, the other side actually cares that you've traded with that opponent in magic terms, which in this case involves putting +1/+1 counters on their creature. That's why the other side says pay 2 and don't need to tap, so you could conceivably do that many times. Look at target opponent's hand. That represents the diplomatic visibility, so the peaking that we talked about earlier. If you do, so that means if they actually have a hand. If they have no card in hand, then you haven't looked at anything, so it doesn't work. So if you do, target creature get +1/+1 until end of turn. Activate only if that player controls a creature with a +1/+1 counter on it. So, in other words, if you've traded with them before, then you can do that. You can look at their hand and get the bonus, get the military bonus that Mongolia gets for having extra visibility on someone. Of course, the +1/+1 counter doesn't have to come from you. That creature might have received that counter a number of different ways, but the card doesn't care. As long as there's a counter on a creature the opponent controls, it's assumed that it came from a trade with you. If it didn't, bonus to you. If you won't tell, we won't tell. And then of course it taps for a colorless, and it may get bounced to your hand if you wish. And yes, I should press that the bouncing aspect is always a may, it's always optional, you don't have to bounce it to your hand. So there you go, that's how I turn a fairly complex concept into a magic card, that of diplomatic visibility, trading, that turns into a combat bonus, whatnot. So as far as I understand, the Mongolian Civ is regarded as a decent Civ in the community. Of course, if you ask me, I'll tell you that all Civs are created equal. You can master and totally rule a game with any Civ, you just have to learn how to play them. But I believe that the Mongolian Civ is relatively popular enough, but not because of that ability. That ability with trading outposts and diplomatic visibility that turns to combat bonuses is very misunderstood. And yet, it has a huge potential, and hopefully this magic card, of all things, can make people understand it a little bit better. Let's take a look at the real reason why people actually love playing Mongolia. It's the Mongol Horde ability of Genghis Khan. All cavalry class units gain extra combat, and they have a chance to capture defeated enemy cavalry class units. So very straightforward, a lot less complicated than this whole trading diplomatic stuff. So our big bad boy here is all about horses, mounted units, and here's his card. 5 mana, green, black, 3 generic. We've got a rare human warrior, 6/4, but wait, not 6/4, because Genghis Khan enters with a +1/+1 counter on it. So he's rather 7/5, quite nice and meaty. And why did I make him 6/4 with a counter? Well, because I wanted him to have a counter upon ETB so that he could use his own abilities. So he has some fuel to use his own abilities if you so wish. You will see his ability is all about +1/+1 counters. The concept of mounted units getting stronger is the first ability. Whenever a creature you control saddles a mount, you may move up to 1 +1/+1 counter from that creature to the mount. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on the mount. So if you've done the math, your rider has gotten a little weaker, you've removed a counter from your rider, but you have added that counter to the mount, and then you get to add another counter to the mount. So the rider is -1/-1, but the mount is +2/+2. by all this shifting of counters. Of course, you need a counter on your rider to do that in the first place, and that's why I made sure that Genghis Khan had one, so he could use his ability once. And of course, perhaps many more times if you add him more counters. So I gave an extra counter to the mount in order to actually motivate you to use this ability. Otherwise, if you're going to simply move a counter from your rider to the mount, then why not just drop counters directly on the mounts? But no, if you actually focus on improving your riders first, then you use this ability and then you net some bonus counters from the whole equation. And then the ability to which I gave the name Mongol Horde is the one where you get to steal some defeated creatures. Whenever a creature dealt damage by a mount or horse you control this turn dies, you may remove a +1/+1 counter from that mount or horse. If you do, put the creature on the battlefield under your control. So there you go, the entire life cycle of the process is rather long-winded and complex, but each part of it is very simple. Make sure that your riders have counters. Those counters move onto mounts when they mount them, and then the mounts get extra firepower. And then finally, the mount has to kill a creature, and then you weaken the mount a little bit by removing a counter, and you get to steal the dead creature. So it works very well. It's an interesting, cool process. It's fairly powerful. And of course, even though the top ability only works with mounts, I made sure that the card was actually as versatile as possible. The bottom ability works with mounts or horses. So your deck doesn't have to be mount tribal exclusively. There aren't a whole lot of mounts, even if I added a few in my set. Thunder Junction invented the concept and didn't make a whole bunch of them, and I don't see Magic rushing to create a whole bunch of them anytime soon. Well, actually, yes, it might happen, but instead they focused on giving us more vehicles with Aether Drift, not so many new mounts. They'll be trickling in, I'm sure, but as of right now, there aren't a whole bunch of mounts, so I made sure that the last ability worked with horses as well. There are a whole bunch of horses in Magic. Well, no, there aren't, but thanks to me, thanks to my made-up Civilization 6 sets, yes, I made sure that there are a whole bunch of horse creatures in fan-made cards. So there's our Genghis Khan, Horse Lord, and if anything else, if you think that the card is sure fun on paper, but actually tricky to actually use and abuse and make those abilities come online, if anything else, he is 7/5 for 5 mana, so that right there is perhaps a good reason to try him as a simply strong as all hail Voltron commander. Some of you might actually prefer the Kublai Khan card that I made, so let's take a look at him. He's got his Gay ability, extra economic policy slots in all government, receive a random Eureka and inspiration when establishing a trading post in another civilization city for the first time. So here, because he's a lot more peaceful, I decided to focus on the exploration part of trading post. So for Genghis Khan, trading post meant ultimately combat bonuses and diplomatic visibility and peeking cards, stuff like that. For Kublai Khan, making trading post means exploring, so therefore I gave him landfall. And just like Eleanor of Aquitaine, I had no choice to make him into a transformable creature, because just like her, he is the leader of 2 different civilizations, but it's the same power either way. So whether you use Kublai Khan as the leader of Mongolia or China, he's still the same old Kublai Khan with the same powers. So he was only ever going to get a single card, and ain't no way I was going to try to fit him in the China set, because the China set was already chock full of ideas and way too many leaders and cards to fit into just 6 cards. I've always insisted on making each little mini pack 6 cards, and that required a little mini miracle for the China set. Just look at how long the China video turned out to be. I had so many things to say. There was no way I was going to try to fit Kublai Khan in the China set. So that's why he's in the Mongolia set only. And no, just like Eleanor, I didn't make any references to the fact that one side of the card has the skin of the Chinese persona, so his nice white gi there is for the China leader, but there's nothing on the card that says that this is the outfit of the Chinese leader. Let's look at the Kublai Khan card. So he starts on the front face, 4 mana, 1 green, 3 generic. So yes, he is mono green, so he wouldn't be able to really synergize with the Genghis Khan cards. You could have Kublai Khan in the 99 of your Genghis Khan deck, but not the other way around. And I think that's probably okay, because Kublai Khan probably wouldn't care to have Genghis Khan in his 99. He goes for a completely different strategy. So there's his landfall. Whenever a land enters under your control, add a green. So that's a little bit like the Lotus Cobra, so that's pretty good. Then, if this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, transform Kublai Khan. So you need to find a way to simply drop 2 lands in the same turn. That's easy enough. Use a fetch land. Play Cultivate, Exploration, any way that you can simply just go fetch a land from your library straight onto play, or get an extra land drop, so there's no problem for green to be able to find a way to flip Kublai Khan. And then on the other side, there's his Gerege ability. Whenever a +1/+1 counter is put on a creature an opponent controls, you may draw a card. So there's his extra bonus Eureka, his science boost. Let's not forget, Eureka means science, and science equals draw. So whenever a trade happens, i.e. whenever a counter is put on an opposing creature, it's assumed, it might not be true, but it's assumed that the counter came from you, from a trade with you, and therefore you get to draw a card. So it puts your opponent into a precarious situation if they play a deck that focuses heavily on +1/+1 counters. If they drop a Hydra that comes in play with, I don't know, 7 +1/+1 counters, guess what? They just made you draw 7 cards. So they have to play very carefully if they have just the wrong type of deck to face Kublai Khan. Oh yeah, by the way, I said there is no mention to the flip side of Kublai Khan as being the leader of China. Well, no, that's not exactly true. I did give him a name that refers to him being the leader of China. So on the front side, he is Kublai Khan, simple Kublai Khan, and on the other side he is Emperor Shizu of Yuan, which is a name that I researched and I came up with. That's what he was known as when he was the Emperor of China. So yes, though there is a thematic slight reference to him wearing that outfit when he is the leader of China. And his stats go from 4/4 to 4/5, so you have an extra incentive to flip him because he gets a little stronger. And then, even though we're done using all of his Civilization 6 abilities and turning them into magic abilities, I still wanted him to synergize by himself and to draw upon the fact that he would most likely be at the helm of a mana-intensive deck. So therefore, whenever you expand 6, you may put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So expand the Bloom Burrow mechanic of triggering an ability whenever you expend your nth mana to cast spells this turn. In this case, your 6th mana. 6th mana is pretty heavy, but once again, you've been dropping a whole lot of lands in order to flip him. In theory, you already have 6 mana by the time you flip him. In fact, it's guaranteed that you do because he costs 4, and then you had to trigger a landfall twice in the same turn in order to flip him. So yes, you do have 4 + 2 = 6. So you have 6 mana available, and if you use all those 6 manas to cast spells, then you've got an extra +1/+1 counter, which you can put on your own creatures if you need the extra military boost, or you can drop on your opponent's creature to do a quote-quote happy trade, but that nets you a card draw. So there you go, very interesting way to build a deck, perhaps a landfall deck, perhaps a +1/+1 counter deck, perhaps a draw trigger deck. Not so easy to do in green. There aren't a lot of whenever you draw cards, do something cool. That's usually blue's dominion. But still, there are 3 very obvious ways to take a deck like that. Maybe a combination of 2 or all 3. You tell me. Let's take a look at the unique units and infrastructure of the Mongolian people. The unit is called the Keshig. It is an archer and also a mounted unit, so a horse archer. So normally I would have made this, according to my own self-imposed rules, I would have made this a human horse archer. But because I wanted more mounts in this little mini bundle and just in the project as a whole, then I decided to focus exclusively on the horse. So this is not a human horse archer, this is simply a horse mount. I've ignored the dude on the horse, on the picture. However, when you saddle this mount, then it's assumed that, hey, if it got saddled, a dude just climbed on its back, or a lady, and therefore it becomes an archer. Well, not really. I didn't make the card gain the archer creature type until end of turn. I could have done that, but I gave it the reach ability. So that is roughly the same thing as saying it's now an archer, it has reach. And I gave it a +1/+1 counter ETB either to itself or really anyone, any creature. It could even be one of your opponents if you want to trigger one of these trades, because why not? It feeds into Genghis Khan's ability. And Kublai Khan, but no, not really, because this creature is black, so you wouldn't be able to use it in your Kublai Khan deck, sadly. And also, one of the main things about the Keshig is that it gets to escort civilian units. Normally, when you build a formation, the speed of the formation, these are Civ 6 terms, mind you. Whenever you make a formation in Civilization 6 with 2 or more units, the speed of the formation is dictated by the slowest unit in the formation. Not so when you are using the Keshig. They are able to move at the top speed of the Keshig, so it's really like the civilian. Here we're talking about builders and settlers, etc. They are literally climbing on the back of the horse and are able to move at top speed. So the fact that the Keshig are used very often to defend your civilians, I gave it a pretty cool ability that mitigated damage to your own creatures. To your own weak creatures. Your weak creatures are assumed to be your civilians. So it says, if a source would deal damage to a creature you control with toughness 1, prevent 1 of that damage. Oh, and it has a saddle 1. So since there's one dude on the back of the horse, I made it easy to saddle. Saddle 1. That's it for the Keshig. The Ordu is the unique infrastructure of the Mongolian people. It's a building that replaces the stable, and if we look at our chart here, buildings usually translate into land auras or artifacts, so this is indeed yet another land aura. For 1 black and 2 generic, it's a common that gives the enchanted land pay 2 and tap the land to put a +1/+1 counter on target mount or horse. So since it is a souped up, improved stable, of course you can expect it to boost your horses. And don't forget that boosting your horses is a pretty important part of the Genghis Khan strategy. So it's expensive, you tap the land itself and pay 2, you've essentially lost 3 mana. But if it makes a difference between stealing a defeated creature and not stealing that creature, then yeah, you'll pay that price, it's worth it. And finally, since this is an improved stable, it does something extra. In Civilization 6, this awesome Mongolian stable also gives extra movement to your mounted units, to your horses essentially. So therefore I translated extra movement to haste. So all your horses and mounts have haste. We all know that that can make a big difference. There's been plenty of powers from various sets like Ether Drift that give haste to your vehicles. Well, the non-artifact equivalent of a vehicle is a mount, and yeah, I figure that we should have some haste for mounts and horses. And since extra movement was concerned here, then I felt it was the perfect opportunity to include haste. And finally, we have a card based off of, this is Kublai Khan's agenda, I believe, the Pax Mongolica. Kublai Khan loves you if you have a lot of creatures and a lot of gold. And he will punish you if you have a small army and or small treasury. So I turned it into an enchantment that really punishes everyone on the whole battlefield, the bigger an army there exists on the battlefield. And if you have a strong economy, you can actually shield a little bit of that penalty. So you've got a common enchantment for 2 black and 1 generic that says, at the beginning of each player's upkeep, Pax Mongolica deals X damage to that player, where X is the greatest number of creatures controlled by any player. So it's not your army, it's not the size of your army, it's the size of whoever has the largest army. Whichever player has the most creatures, that player sets the size of the X for everyone. Of course, that X could change. Of course, the player that sets that X could change. But yeah, basically, whoever has the greatest amount of creatures, everyone takes that much damage during their upkeep. But to reflect the fact that your economy can save you, that player may pay 1 any number of times. Each time this cost is paid, prevent up to 2 damage dealt this way. So economy is gold is ramping, so it made sense that just having a lot of mana can save you, can shield you from that damage. So I managed to squeak in there the fact that if you have a strong economy, you can be saved, yes, but I didn't squeak the concept that if you have a strong army, Kublai Khan likes you, so your strong army can help shield you from damage. That I didn't do. I could have said you could tap your own creatures to shield you from that damage as well, but no, I wanted simply the size of the army to set the number of damage being dealt to everyone and the economy to protect you. I wanted the two concepts to act independently from each other. So there you go. So that's something that you put in your deck if you think that you have a large army and somehow you can survive that much damage. Maybe you have a large army and a lot of ramp, which is perfectly possible with a Genghis Khan deck because he's got black and green, but maybe you also have some life gain, so maybe you want to damage everyone with the size of your army, force them to hose their own mana to stay alive, and you don't really care because you generate so much life gain that you offset all the life that you've cost yourself. So there's a number of interesting ways of turning that card into something playable. And if you play 60 card Magic, I shudder to think at what it would look like if someone drops 2 or 3 or 4 copies of that in play at the same time. That would get pretty nasty pretty quickly. That will end the game rather fast. And not necessarily in your favor, you might end up killing yourself with that thing. So that completes the Mongolian set. I had a lot of fun turning a often misunderstood Civ into a set of cards, and Kublai Khan also was great. The reliance on Genghis Khan's horses, moving counters around in order to steal creatures, it's been a lot of fun. And since green is involved, you can perhaps force your opponent's creatures to attack in order to ensnare them, to entrap them, block them and kill them, steal their creatures, or put a lure on a horse, give it death touch, and then steal a whole bunch of your opponent's creatures in one single attack if you have enough +1/+1 counters on that horse. Sure, the horse might die, but that is a game-flipping move there, so the game is practically yours at that point. So a whole bunch of neat little things that you can do with Genghis Khan, Horse Lord, and Kublai Khan, Mongolia as a whole. This whole, you get some counters, I get some counters, but I come out on top. Let me know what you think of this set. Which other cards would you squeeze in either of these decks, or would you use these 6 cards into other decks, either that come from my Civ 6 projects or other existing decks that you might have on your shelf right now? Let me know. Loki the Gamer asks you to like, subscribe, check out the Patreon, and kneel as well, as the name of the channel asks you to, but don't stay kneeling too long. It's pretty tricky to get on the horse while kneeling.